So we just went straight into it. But no, that helps a lot. Okay.
Now that we're all settled on identity, and nobody at home knows what the heck we're talking about.
So with the in Beyond Blockchain article, he was talking about I guess system has a net zero balance agreement, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but the Halawa idea of being able to transfer mutual credit.
Yep.
And since this is sort of a new economy or new way of connecting, and I've been thinking about this myself, and I'm like, I don't know if this is rhetorical, but how do we bring in, or
how do newcomers participate, or?
So I'll just read the question I wrote. Okay.
Yeah.
So is the basic input of the mutual credit a promise or an agreement? Since the balance of the system is net zero, the agreement between parties begins this change or shift of that balance. And then there's an addendum to that. We all have the capacity to create value and evaluate it. So, so that's where I was going with that. But yeah.
I don't know if I have a short answer for that. That may be a better one for Art, but I'll kind of take me being the philosopher, right? Like I'll take a step back and I'll talk about how relationships get built. So in general, the way that trust gets built or a relationship gets built is, I see it as like a dance. My friend Christopher Allen wrote an article about a decade ago or more on progressive trust, where he kind of describes this dance. And the simple version is, when you first meet someone, you take a tiny risk. That tiny risk might be that you make eye contact. It may be that somebody else made eye contact and you held the eye contact, or that you glanced away and then you looked back again, right? All of those, there's little social risks there. Maybe the person musters up the courage and they come and say hi, right? Which is another bigger risk. They had gotten enough eye contact that they maybe felt comfortable to go and say hello. And relationship progresses. But each of these things ends up being a feeler, essentially, a making yourself vulnerable and taking some risk that then gets, hopefully, held well or received well or taken care of. And through a series of interactions, you start to build up a feeling for what the landscape's like. Is this going to be a friendship? Are we going to go into business together? Am I marrying this person? Right? And as that relationship deepens, you may come up with other ways of sculpting the relationship. So when you sign a contract with somebody, you're taking on a risk because you're basically saying, I'm willing to have the courts and the prison system and the police get involved in enforcing the agreement that I'm making here. So you're suddenly exposing yourself to all of that stuff should you not hold up this agreement. It's a significant uptick in the amount of risk that you're taking on. And at the same time, having you be vulnerable in that way makes the relationship much more likely to hold. That's true not only for like legal contract stuff, it's true when you introduce a girlfriend to your family, right? And you go, hey, this is somebody special in my life, and all of a sudden there's a different social dynamic and pressure to behave in that relationship in certain ways, right? And in part that's what marriage is about. It's not just the legal side of things, it's the saying before the community, like, hey, this is the thing that we're doing, and we want you guys helping us sort of be in a relationship together. We want you to support us as a union. So that said, halawa, right?
Yeah.
the members are interacting with one another, and then early on, if you're dealing with a stranger, you might not be willing to make yourself. They may need to show up contributing something before they're able to borrow something, essentially, right? Like they may show up having to put the money in first, or put the. And this is how we often do. When people show up and they have no reputation, they have no history, they show up with an insurance policy. They show up with a little cash on the table to start playing the game so that other people's risk is lowered. So that other people aren't being required to take quite such a big risk with an unknown. And after they are able to build history and relationship and reputation becomes valuable because if they screwed up that reputation, they lose the access to the kinds of interactions that they would otherwise have access to. The requirement that you show up with cash goes away. And we do this all the time. We see this even at restaurants and things where, somebody knows the waitress and they come in every day and one day they don't have cash. They forgot their wallet. And you'll get me tomorrow, honey. Right? There's a recognition that there's not much risk. Jim's going to default. He comes in every day. He gets the same thing. Yeah. Stranger shows in up off the street and says, "Oh, sorry, I forgot my wallet." You might not be willing to extend the same kind of vulnerability, being vulnerable to them. So,
yeah, and that segues really well into my next question, because I was thinking, so how does this shift or how does this transformation happen? And for some reason, I just keep thinking of inputs or inflows, and how do things flow from one state to the next. So I was thinking, so the new system must accept the inflow of information or currency in both ways, currency and currency, SEE, as you have on the website, from the old system. Or is the flow merely just an influence? So the inflow from the old system, is it a flow of influence, knowledge, and wisdom rather than fiat currency, like actual material goods?
Dollars, let's say, are currently accepted widely. And people who are participating in some communal system thing, one of the ways that they can offset risk is to accept dollars. Because if you show up and you show up with dollars, but you end up not delivering on the promises that you had made, cool, I can walk away with the dollars and I can go use those in the existing system. One of the ways that, well, I'll just leave that there. Whether that is to go buy hard drives for computers or a car or whatever, right? But dollars aren't the only thing that those people show up with. They show up, and hard drives aren't the only thing that they show up with, right? They show up with skills. They show up with knowledge. They show up with insights. If they start bringing those too, the goal with the new system stuff is basically to enable better flows of those activities. People be able to go, oh, Jim has brilliant insights with regard to cars and their engines or whatever. I agree about the inputs thing. For us, another critical part is that you have inputs that feed into some system. And for us, this is not like the way that you had framed that question was existing system, new system, stuff's going to pour in. And yes, at some level, like there's this big meta layer of activity. You could think of activity currently being sculpted by dollars and corporations and that whole, and the legal framework that sits around all that. Courts, prisons, police, etc. And that stuff is orchestrating a lot of human activity right now. And this new emerging stuff is going to start to orchestrate human activity as well. People will steer themselves using these tools in addition to those other tools, or in replacing those other tools. But for us, there's input, there's transformation, and there's outputs. Mm-hmm. And you have that happening at every layer. So we think of all of these things as like social organisms, but any organism takes inputs, it transforms those in some way, and generates outputs. Mm-hmm. So grass takes in light and carbon dioxide and maybe some water from the soil and possibly some other nutrients. And the light allows it to do photosynthesis, where it pulls carbon dioxide out of the air, it strips the oxygen, the O2 off, it breathes that back out, it uses the carbon to build up plant matter, and it grows. Mm-hmm. Right? And so its inputs are light, water, air, mostly. Its output is, and air was carbon dioxide, its output was oxygen and plant matter, right? And then a cow comes along and it eats the grass, right? Its inputs are grass, maybe water, right? Its outputs, poop and slobber and meat, mm-hmm. and milk, right? Mm-hmm. And then let's say a human comes along and they drink some of the milk, right? So there's every organism ends up taking in inputs, transforming them, putting out outputs. We believe that some of these things are going to do a better job of those transformations than existing systems do. People find the right organisms to make use of for taking inputs and altering them into other useful outputs. And so we think that one way to frame it is a capital to community conversion, right? So you've got dollars in the real world. You want to start playing in this new place, with these other folks. They don't know you. You show up on day one, and either you bring some dollars that help you start interacting more deeply with people quickly without them having to take a huge risk, or you show up and you start helping folks first and building relationships, and then because you've been helping people, they start recognizing that you are contributing, and then you begin being able to consume as well. They start contributing back to you because they like the kinds of help that you are providing for others. But yeah, I see the existing system as people will be able to use dollars to sort of shortcut their way into some relationships, mm-hmm. but that's dependent on those relationships. What do those people want in return, right? Somebody can show up with a bunch of dollars. It doesn't necessarily mean you're willing to sleep with them, mm-hmm. right? Because sleeping with somebody who's not your husband may not be worth unlimited dollars for you, So, those are and what we think is going to happen is that the value of dollars is actually going to decrease as a result. If people are starting to be able to orchestrate their activities with these other mechanisms, well, the main mechanism that we've used for orchestrating our activities, dollars, is going to lose its value. Mm-hmm. It's going to become less valuable. Not that it becomes worthless, but it'll become less valuable than it was in a world where that was kind of the only game in town.
Yeah. And I was listening to Art. He was speaking at Occupy Wall Street, mm-hmm. I think, maybe in 2011. Mm-hmm. And he was kind of speaking on that and saying how we use the dollar, or any specific, let's say, paper money, as a symbol. So, like, you're transferring that either trust or value that you put in something, giving it to somebody, and then we sort of track the way that symbol propagates instead of the value that's exchanged.
Being generated in exchange for that, yeah.
And I completely understand, what you're saying about how we look at money will obviously, in certain ways decrease, but that's a sort of a good thing because we have more agency in how we decide to exchange value and exchange with the other any kind of information. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of a question that I guess opens that to more inspection. I don't know if that's the right word, but so I was thinking. So is there and this has to sort of do with currencies, cryptocurrencies in general, not just with what MetaCurrency and Ceptr are doing. But is there any like retroactive risk in participating in raising of funds or doing ICOs or anything like that? Even though, I mean, I know Ceptr's approach is different in thinking about tokens and coins and stuff. And all those are subject to, all the other cryptocurrencies are subject to like speculation on the crypto markets. So with a lot of the influx of dollars, we say, into the systems.
How do you keep it from getting
out of hand?
Out of hand?
Or like, if once it's in the system, people can sort of maybe do anything they want with it. And is that sort of, that's okay because it is decentralized and people have, if they want to create a community of trolls, let's say, and they want to pass money around doing certain things, and
then that's what they're going to be doing.
Yeah.
The people who want to play that game can play that game. I think there is real risk associated with taking money, basically. And it specifically has to do with how you take the money, like what the relationship is like that is coming in through. Most of the cryptocurrencies that are out there, they're doing initial coin offerings, etc., are structuring their relationship with other folks so in a way where the people who created the little thing, the software developers, can hopefully make a bunch of money. And and so they're trying to structure the whole thing in a way where, there's only this much, and you got to get in early, and then hopefully you can write it up and then sell it, right? And so that's a whole. They're trying to pull people into gambling, basically. And for us, if we pull people in a gambling way, we think there's a real risk, because we don't think that ends up creating the kind of communal patterns that we're wanting to generate. And so if we hold an initial coin offering that looks like those ones, there may be some risk there. Right now, we're also looking at possibly facing some other risks, which has to do with all this ICO stuff is happening right now. I've got buddies who are actors that are like, hey, what ICOs should I invest in? Like, what the, that's not a healthy, situation. People are going to get screwed. There's going to be people who raise $30 million and disappear, or raise $30 million and nothing comes of it. And because people are in this gambling mindset of, I better not miss out. If I had put $1,000 into Ethereum, then I'd be a millionaire now. People are not, one, they don't have the ability to assess the risks. Two, they're not. They're just going, well, I'll put 1,000 on black, and hopefully I win. We think that that's going to blow up in a bad way. We think that people are going to get burned on it. There's going to be a regulatory crackdown. We were planning on doing some kind of initial coin offering thing, maybe in January. And over the last week, we started talking about, should we be doing that earlier? And some of the advisors that we've been talking to, who are like kind of ICO people, are like, maybe not. Maybe you guys need to be on a different path, because that feels like it might lead to it could bring some dough, but it might not bring the kind of growth that you're wanting to nurture. So we're going to be making that call sometime this week, basically.
One thought I had was that I don't know if I've seen applied, because I haven't really. I mean, I've put like a couple dollars into like Bitcoin and Litecoin just to see like what is going on. And I've talked to my family about it, like what these things are, and thinking about them as investment tools and stuff like that. But one application I was thinking of over in the past couple days, and from what I'm seeing that you guys are building, is that it's not like you're purchasing any stakes necessarily. it is sort of like if you're beta testing, you can beta test with money. So if you, once the product is, let's say, if you want to test it in alpha, you're going to have to put a little bit of value into it just to get it to work. And then however you're using that, if you're a developer, if you're just joining a community that's in alpha phase, that's what you guys are using. So it's just staying within that community, sort of. And if you decide as a community to, let's say there's a Ceptr community that you're not forced to be a part of, but you can be a part of, if you wanted to shift some of that value to the Ceptr community to help the whole like foundation or something like that, then that's what you guys choose to do, rather than it being like ICO. Okay, we have all the money now. Now we're going to figure out how to like distribute it, or where to use it, or how to pay people, or whatever needs to happen with it. So do you know of any, I guess, organizations or anybody that's doing that with their coin offerings?
Not with their coin offerings. That might be kind of close to some of the stuff we're trying to do.
Okay. And then, more questions may come up, but I have, I guess, two other ones that sort of bring it. One sort of brings it to this space. So in working with the different residencies, I guess, will the community involvement or the relationships that are built, or anything really that goes on in the houses, or just even if it's virtual, are those, I guess, I'm trying to think, are those going to be applied to the system, or this is more, I don't want to use this phrase, but a social experiment, or is it kind of like sort of a reflection? Yeah, I guess that's more what I'm asking. Is it a reflection of the holochain technology and the mission and goals of Ceptr and MetaCurrency?
Arthur's goal is to have this feel a bit like an embodied, like living in the way that people are going to be living in the future. I think is kind of what he's hoping this summer looks like. We'll see how close we get to that. We don't have all those tools built, right? But there are some interesting ways in which we can take care, and we're operating at a small enough community size that this is sort of like how villages have always steered themselves, basically. So there are ways in which we can take care of each other well, and keep track of like who needs what and how they need that support pretty well. When you get to bigger sizes, part of the reason we're building all this tech is you can't really do that stuff well at really big size yet. Couple things there. This summer we're going to be doing both technical development and communications development. The communication stuff basically being largely focused on how do we make this fairly complicated stuff understandable to the world so that other people know how to engage in it and go, oh, that's cool, I want to do that, or participate or use it or whatever. And then two, the activity that we're doing here, we're right now trying to come up with better ways for making activity visible. And the last week or two we've been having conversations about that. The first thing that's important in making something visible is just making it visible to you, right? Like, how can you take activity that you've done during the day and suddenly record that in some condensed version? You don't want to replay the entire day in your head, but I did 3 hours of work, or whatever. Or I took this input, which was a blank piece of paper and some thoughts from Arthur, and converted into, transformed that into this output. It was a blog post that went up on this day, and it was 13 paragraphs long and it got 400 likes, or and we have automated systems in certain areas that help us with that. So GitHub, on the code end of things, as a side effect of people doing their work, also gives them pretty decent tracking of what work has been done. It doesn't tell you how useful that code was necessarily, that one change, but it can tell you how many lines did you change. And it can show that, hey, this is getting used a lot. Like at certain scales. You don't always have transparency into the perceived value from other people's perspective. And we don't think we're going to get to perfect on that stuff. But if you can get to better, then you can steer better. So step one is, how do you make that visible to an individual? And then step two is, okay, how do you, which of those things do you end up sharing, and with whom? Does that get shared with the community as a whole? Does that get shared with some? And then a third part has to do with, how do you value that? Because though we're not paying people this summer, we do want to recognize contributions, and if we, somehow this thing makes a lot of dough in the next few years, we want those contributions to be valued. We want to contribute back, basically. Though we've been very careful to try to pull people in for whom this work is the work they want to do, rather than for whom they want to have ridden a rocket ship. There's lots of places to go ride rocket ships. That's not the culture that we're trying to build. Yeah. So, does that answer the question, or is there other parts that I should?